The national assault on Vermont has begun. Michael Bloomberg's Everytown ads are covering media sites across the nation, depicting his dishonest attempt at enticing prohibited persons to break the law as proof that Vermont needs new gun laws. This was timed perfectly to support Gun Sense Vermont's attack on Vermonters with their universal background check bill. We realize this bill seems benign now, but this is not what Gun Sense Vermont really wants. Last year, Gun Sense Vermont supported 19 gun control bills, including an all-out ban on semi-automatic rifles and high-capacity magazines. This year, the only thing they want is universal background checks. That's a lie. This bill is just a stepping stone for further increase in anti-gun legislation. 2014 proved they could not win an outright ban on firearms, so this year they changed their tactics. This bill can be changed in committee, on the Senate floor, or at any time in the future. This is our analysis of the Gun Sense video.
I was about 11 years old, a Christmas present from my mother, a second-hand single-shot .22 Winchester.
Congratulations, Bill! That is a heartwarming story that reflects the long, proud history of gun ownership in Vermont. Family heirlooms being passed down from parent to child for over 200 years. Too bad that a child cannot pass a federal background check for a rifle until they are 18. Transferring ownership of a firearm to a minor is a felony under federal law. Thus, 2015 may end a 2-century-old family tradition in Vermont.
Winchester. It was handed down from my father-in-law.
Under the new UBC bill, transfers from non-immediate family members must go through an NICS check. Mrs. Tucker and her father-in-law would be felons.
It was a Winchester Model 94. We've always had guns in the house.
This is a Remington Model 742. It's a high-powered deer rifle.
Here, Dan Mulligan, paid director of Gun Sense Vermont, brags about having a high-powered Remington 742 deer rifle. Dan, I don't know how to tell you this, but thanks to your efforts in New York, your gas-operated semi-automatic deer rifle with detachable magazine and pistol grip stock can be classified as an assault rifle. Good thing you just moved from New York, otherwise you would be a felon with your unregistered semi-automatic firearm. Now that you started working for Gun Sense, you will try to pass the same legislation here.
In Vermont, folks who are domestic abusers can slip through the cracks. Vermont currently does not require background checks for unlicensed sales.
Dan says that domestic abusers can slip through the cracks and buy guns. All of Gun Sense spokespeople in their video admit that Vermonters already have firearms, many being passed down from generation to generation, with 70 to 75% of all Vermont households having at least one firearm. Passing feel-good legislation that will register every firearm in this state will not fix a problem that does not exist. As a matter of fact, despite what Gun Sense is saying, domestic violence is at a record low in Vermont. Our extremely low number of firearm-related domestic violence homicides has already dropped by 50% since the 1990s. The Castleton poll, bought and paid for by Gun Sense Vermont, has been widely discredited with its limited number of respondents, targeted polling groups, and trick questions. Instead of listening to these lies, we refer to the recent unbiased PBS poll, where an open response from the public was used, and which generated a response of over 126,000 people. A simple question was asked: would you support more restrictions on guns in your state? 95% of the respondents, that's 120,000 people, answered a resounding no. Laws like this unnecessarily punish lawful gun owners.
Universal background checks are going to protect basically our women and children.
Why does Jerry characterize the women of Vermont as weak and helpless? This is an insulting and chauvinistic mentality that Gun Sense perpetrates throughout its public statement. A large number of women in Vermont are proud firearm owners. If a woman wants a firearm to protect herself from a stalker or domestic abuser, she will not be able to buy a gun from the neighbor she's known for 30 years without a background check. The penalty for her not going through the universal background check process is a conviction with a year in prison and a fine of $500, just because she desires to protect herself. How is this protecting women?
Absolutely, I believe in a right to bear arms, but I also believe that there's a right to, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if my next door neighbor just got out of prison for committing a violent crime, he should not be able to have a gun. I have rights too.
Lauren, if you believe that Article 16 is an absolute right, then why are you trying to regulate that constitutional right and limit the good and honest people of Vermont from possessing and transferring firearms, neighbor to neighbor? By the way, the chances are slim to none that your neighbor is a dangerous criminal. You talk about violent felons like there is some massive number of these dangerous people prowling the streets of Vermont. There aren't. FBI data proves Vermont is the safest state in the nation with the lowest violent crime rate. To say differently is a lie. The truth is, the majority of prohibited persons are accused or convicted of non-violent crimes. Divorce case? Attorneys routinely obtain restraining orders to protect property subject to the divorce proceedings. Under universal background checks, you will be a prohibited person, banned for life from firearm ownership. Did you seek treatment for PTSD, insomnia, or substance abuse? Under universal background checks, you will be a prohibited person, banned for life from firearm ownership. Using medical marijuana for cancer treatment or glaucoma? Under universal background checks, you will be a prohibited person, banned for life from firearm ownership. Under S.31, the Universal Background Check Bill, all your medical records will be compiled into the federal database.
I'd like legislation to catch up with the times.
I'd like to see universal background checks across the board.
At the end of the day, we have to really bring some common sense back into the issue of guns. We're all believers in the absolute right of all Americans and all Vermonters to own and bear arms. This is not about limiting people's freedom.
Because it's common sense. Because everybody is concerned about protection for themselves and their families.
We're not taking anything away from people who want to have a gun as long as they have a background check.
I think that universal background checks are really important and an important part of that Second Amendment.
I'm sorry, Jerry. Did you just say universal background checks are an important part of the Second Amendment? Where exactly is that written in the Bill of Rights? Oh, wait! There it is! Let me check the Vermont Constitution. Ah, there it is. I wonder why no one ever noticed that before. Seriously, if you truly believe that the right to keep and bear arms is absolute, why should I, as a free person in Vermont, have to go through a federal background check for something that is perfectly legal and protected under Article 16 of the Vermont Constitution? The federal government does not have the right to control commerce within the borders of any state. Why do you want to force all citizens to submit to federal oversight under the threat of imprisonment and loss of a constitutional right? What is your real goal? Sorry, Lauren, the laws in Vermont do not need to catch up with the times. They have kept Vermont the safest state in the nation for over 200 years. Jerry, why do you want to see universal background checks across the board? What do you want to do? Register every gun owner? Dan, why do you think that your idea of common sense gun control would make the safest state in the nation with the lowest violent crime rate safer? We have laws that work for Vermont. Changing what works does not make any sense. Why do you insist this is not about limiting people's freedoms, when in fact, it does? Bill, just like Dan, repeats they're not taking anything away from people, when in fact you are forcing a new mandate into a currently legal right. After everything Gun Sense Vermont has said has been repeatedly disproved, why do the good and honest people of Vermont have to defend our constitutional rights from this unending assault? A note to Michael Bloomberg: your undercover sting is a premeditated and fabricated lie. Your accusation that 1 in 24 people in Vermont are criminals is ridiculous and insulting to every good and honest person in the state. You have poked the sleeping bear, and the bear has awoken.